Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe so you won't miss the next story that might brighten your day. The first crack of thunder split the night as Sylvia Grant kicked open the heavy courthouse doors, rain streaming from her coat like a storm come to life. Gasps rippled through the crowded hallway. Everyone turned to see the silver-haired grandmother who had just defied the very family that tried to take everything from her. Her son stood frozen at the end of the corridor, shame written across his face. Beside him, his wife's confident smile finally broke, the echo of the gavel still ringing like a challenge in the air. Sylvia's eyes, calm and unyielding, held them both. In that single moment, the quiet widow revealed a strength no one had believed she possessed. This is the night a mother's dignity and the truth itself rose higher than the storm. Let me take you inside the battle that turned a lifetime of sacrifice into the most unforgettable victory of her life. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and sharpened pencils, a mix of history and tension. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, striping the polished floor with bands of gold. Sylvia Grant stepped through the heavy oak doors, her cane tapping softly against the marble. She held her chin high, eyes steady, though her heart thudded like a drum. On the bench, Judge Harrison paused mid-sentence, his gaze lifted and locked on her. For a moment, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. "Mrs. Grant, Sylvia Grant," he said, voice low but unmistakably shaken. The attorneys glanced up from their papers. A bailiff froze mid-stride, even the quiet shuffle of the clerk's pen stilled. "Yes, Your Honor," Sylvia replied, her voice calm yet carrying a quiet power. The judge removed his glasses and stared as if he'd seen a ghost from another life. "I knew you years ago. You helped me when I was just an intern." A murmur rippled across the courtroom. Sylvia didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply gave the smallest nod, a flicker of recognition, then lowered her eyes to the polished floor. Before anyone could speak again, the sound of the gavel cracked through the silence and the scene faded. Hours earlier, Cedar Hill had awakened in a hush of morning mist. The little house at the end of Rosewood Lane sat beneath towering pines, the gray shingles damp with dew. Inside, Sylvia filled her old silver coffee pot, the one her late husband Richard had polished every Sunday morning. The pot was dented and dulled now, but she refused to replace it. Some things, she believed, held memories in their metal. She poured steaming coffee into a chipped blue mug and carried it to the back porch. Beyond the railing, the garden still blushed with the roses Richard had planted decades earlier, deep crimson blooms that seemed to glow even in the thin light of dawn. "Morning, Sylvia," called a familiar voice. Mrs. Hartwell, the neighbor from across the lane, leaned on the fence in her bathrobe, holding a basket of laundry. Her hair was a cloud of silver. "Morning," Sylvia answered with a smile. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep. My grandson's dog barked all night." Mrs. Hartwell squinted. "Big day for you. You look determined." Sylvia chuckled softly, hiding the unease that coiled in her stomach. "Just another Monday," she said, but it wasn't. By mid-afternoon, the clouds had rolled in heavy and gray. Sylvia set the table with quiet precision. Linen napkins folded sharp as origami, crystal glasses that caught the dim light. She lit a single candle, a habit she'd kept since Richard's passing, a way of inviting warmth into an empty room. The front door opened without a knock. "Mom," Marcus called, stepping inside. He was tall like his father, shoulders broad, but his eyes darted with a nervous energy. "Hello, sweetheart," Sylvia greeted, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Clara followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She was striking, dark hair perfectly pinned, perfume crisp and expensive, but her smile felt rehearsed. "Mrs. Grant," she said, using the formal title that always stung. Sylvia noticed how Clara's gaze swept over the room, pausing at the antique china cabinet, the mahogany sideboard, the framed wedding photo of Richard and Sylvia, as if cataloging items on a silent inventory. "Smells wonderful," Marcus said, though he barely glanced at the roast chicken resting on the counter. Sylvia poured tea, the clink of porcelain the only sound for a long moment. Finally, Clara cleared her throat. "Sylvia," she began, folding her manicured hands. "Marcus and I have been talking. We're worried about you living out here all alone." "I manage just fine," Sylvia replied, her voice steady. "It's not safe." Clara pressed. "And this house, it's large, too much for one person. We've found a beautiful community near the city, full of people your age, activities, medical staff on call. You'd love it." Marcus shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Sylvia set down her cup, her movements deliberate. "This is my home," she said quietly. "Every board and brick carries a piece of my life." Clara's smile tightened. "Memories don't keep you warm at night." Marcus finally spoke, his voice hesitant. "Mom, maybe we should at least consider it." Sylvia studied her son, the boy she had raised through late-night tutoring jobs. The young man she had carried through every sickness and heartbreak could barely meet her eyes. A cool draft drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of approaching rain. She felt the shift deep inside, a small crack, the first fracture of something she had always believed unbreakable. Sylvia folded her napkin and placed it on the table, her hands as calm as her voice. "Thank you for your concern," she said, looking directly at Clara. "But this discussion is over." Clara's eyes flashed, a flicker of something sharper than concern. Determination, maybe possession. The candle flame wavered in the draft, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. Sylvia's heart tightened. She knew a storm was coming. Rain came early that Thursday, a thin gray curtain sliding across Cedar Hill. Sylvia Grant stood at her kitchen sink, watching the drops chase one another down the window pane. She had just finished polishing her late husband's silver coffee pot when the doorbell rang sharp, insistent, like a warning bell. When she opened the door, Clara swept in without so much as a greeting. Behind her trailed a man in a tailored suit carrying a leather portfolio and a small laser measuring device. His shoes left faint, wet prints on the hardwood. "Sylvia," Clara said brightly, voice sugar-coated but brisk. "This is Mr. Langford. He's a real estate appraiser. We need to get some quick numbers so Marcus and I can help you make the best decision about the house." Sylvia's brows lifted. "Decision? I don't recall asking for an appraisal." "It's just preliminary," Clara replied, already stepping deeper into the hallway. "You'll thank us later. We're looking out for you." Mr. Langford gave a polite nod. "Shouldn't take long, ma'am. Lovely property. Original cedar beams, if I'm not mistaken." Sylvia simply stepped aside. "By all means," she said softly. Inside, the man began measuring walls, snapping photos with a sleek tablet. Clara followed him room to room, narrating square footage and pointing out potential upgrades. They spoke as if Sylvia were invisible, as if the house had already slipped from her hands. She remained silent, trailing them like a shadow. Her gaze lingered on every doorway, every picture frame. Her calm was not weakness, it was calculation. Later, when the appraiser finally left, Clara lingered. "We'll send the report," she said, smoothing her coat. "Marcus will call you tonight. We can sign the initial paperwork this weekend." Sylvia met her daughter-in-law's eyes. "Paperwork for what?" "For a sale, of course," Clara answered, almost impatient. "This place is far too much for you, and think of the money you'll have, freedom, comfort." "I see," Sylvia said quietly. Clara hesitated at the door, unsettled by the older woman's steady gaze. "You'll understand soon," she added, then left without a goodbye. That night the house felt emptier than ever. Sylvia lit a single candle and settled into Richard's old armchair. Memories rose like smoke. She was 23 again, standing in a cold classroom after hours, chalk dust on her sweater. Richard had been the janitor back then, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a guitar case slung across his back. He had fixed a broken window while she graded papers, humming an old blues tune. By the end of that winter, they were inseparable. Their life together had been a quiet tapestry of late-night dinners and whispered promises. When Richard died 5 years earlier, she thought she had buried the best parts of herself with him. But tonight, as the candle flickered, she felt his presence as sharply as the scent of cedar that still lingered in the beams he had polished by hand. Unable to sleep, Sylvia wandered to Richard's study, a room she rarely entered now. The cedar desk stood where it always had, heavy and warm, the wood still smelling faintly of resin. She opened the top drawer, expecting nothing but old stationery. Instead, she found an envelope sealed with thick wax and marked in Richard's careful handwriting. "For Sylvia, if ever you are in doubt." Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Inside lay a neat stack of documents, property deeds, investment statements with numbers far larger than she'd imagined, and a will written in her husband's bold, deliberate script. The words blurred for a moment before she focused. "All assets, holdings, and properties belong to my beloved wife, Sylvia Grant. Our son Marcus shall inherit a modest trust only if he treats his mother with love and respect during her lifetime." Sylvia pressed a hand to her mouth. Richard had quietly built a fortune, small properties, well-timed investments, all while she believed they lived on a teacher's pension. He had planned for her, protected her even from beyond the grave. A soft knock startled her. "Mrs. Grant." It was the voice of young Olivia Hartwell, the neighbor's granddaughter, who sometimes brought fresh bread. "Grandma sent me to check if you need anything." The lights were still on. Sylvia quickly wiped her eyes and opened the door. "Thank you, dear, I'm fine." Olivia studied her with innocent curiosity. "Grandma says storms bring out old ghosts." Sylvia smiled faintly. "Sometimes they bring out truths we've forgotten." The next morning she phoned a number she hadn't dialed in years. "Victoria Hale," answered a warm but firm voice. "Victoria, it's Sylvia Grant," she said, surprising herself with how steady she sounded. A pause, then a delighted exclamation. "Sylvia, my goodness, it's been ages. I need to talk," Sylvia said, "about protecting what Richard left us." Victoria's tone turned businesslike. "Say no more. Come to my office this afternoon. We'll make sure everything is in order." Sylvia hung up and allowed herself a long breath. The storm outside had quieted, but inside she felt a different kind of weather, resolve hardening like ice. She touched the cedar desk once more as if to thank Richard for his silent vigilance. Whatever Clara and Marcus believed, this house and the life within it was far from defenseless. The late afternoon sky over Cedar Hill hung heavy with bruised clouds, the color of slate. Sylvia Grant set a teapot on the stove, the gentle hiss of the burner the only sound in the quiet house. She'd expected them today. Her son and his wife always arrived when the light was fading, as if dusk gave cover to unpleasant business. The doorbell chimed once, sharp and deliberate. Sylvia opened it to find Marcus and Clara standing shoulder to shoulder, rain clinging to their coats. Marcus's jaw was tight. Clara's expression gleamed with something colder than impatience. "Mom, we need to talk," Marcus said, his voice clipped. "Of course," Sylvia replied, stepping aside. They entered without answering. Clara carried a sleek leather folder, her heels clicking across the hardwood. She laid the folder on the dining table as though staking a claim. "We've brought some paperwork," Clara announced. "It's a power of attorney agreement. Standard, really. It'll make everything simpler, paying bills, handling emergencies. All you have to do is sign." Sylvia poured hot water over the tea leaves, her movements unhurried. "That's thoughtful," she said, her tone as mild as the steam curling from the pot. "But I can pay my own bills." Clara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "This is about protection. Marcus and I worry you're becoming forgetful. It happens to everyone." Marcus shifted, glancing at his wife before adding, "It's just in case something happens, Mom." Sylvia carried the teacups to the table and sat. She folded her hands, looked from her son to his wife, and offered a faint smile. "You think I'm losing my mind?" Clara leaned forward. "We've spoken with an attorney. If you don't sign, there are legal avenues to ensure your safety. A declaration of mental incompetence isn't uncommon in situations like this." The words hung like a cold draft through the room. Sylvia lifted her cup, inhaled the Earl Grey's bergamot scent, and took a slow, deliberate sip. "Interesting," she said softly. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom, we just want what's best." "What's best?" Sylvia interrupted gently. "Is that you both sit and have tea before you catch a chill." Clara blinked, caught off guard by the calm. "You're not taking this seriously." "Oh, I assure you," Sylvia said, setting her cup down with quiet precision, "I take family very seriously." The silence that followed was thicker than the storm clouds outside. 2 days later, Sylvia walked through the polished marble lobby of Hale and Associates in downtown Hartford. Victoria Hale rose from behind her mahogany desk, arms open. "Sylvia, you look as composed as ever," the attorney said, offering a warm handshake. "Appearances can be useful," Sylvia replied with a small smile. They moved into a private conference room where Victoria spread out documents, trust agreements, property titles, bank statements. "Richard prepared well," she said, tapping the papers. "Your portfolio has grown nicely. The apartment building on Linden Avenue is worth a small fortune now." "And the tenants?" Sylvia asked. "Leases are solid." Ironically, Victoria added with a wry grin, "One of the renters is listed as Marcus Grant, Unit 3B. Sylvia allowed herself the faintest lift of an eyebrow. "How poetic." "If you choose," Victoria continued, "you can transfer ownership into a charitable trust. It keeps the assets protected and supports the foundation you mentioned." "Yes," Sylvia said, voice firm. "Let's move everything, stocks, properties, all of it into the trust, and keep my name as sole trustee." Victoria studied her. "Are you sure? That leaves Marcus with nothing unless you personally allow it." Sylvia's eyes softened. "Marcus will have a chance to earn back what matters, but not through threats." That evening, as the wind rattled the cedar shutters, Sylvia returned home with a quiet sense of resolve. She brewed chamomile tea and carried it to the sitting room where her neighbor, Mrs. Hartwell, stopped by unannounced. "You've been busy," Mrs. Hartwell said, lowering herself onto the sofa. "I saw you downtown earlier, walking like a woman with purpose." Sylvia smiled, a secret glint in her eyes. "Just taking care of unfinished business." Mrs. Hartwell leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Word around the hill is that your daughter-in-law's been asking questions about your finances." I told her nothing, of course. "Thank you," Sylvia said. "Some things aren't hers to know." The following Sunday, Marcus and Clara returned, folder in hand once more. Rain slicked Marcus's hair. Clara's lipstick shone a determined red. "Mother," Clara began, "this can't wait. If you won't sign, we'll petition the court to declare you legally incompetent. It's for your own protection." Sylvia sat in Richard's old armchair, the fireplace throwing amber light across her face. She folded her hands in her lap, looking every bit the aging widow they believed her to be. "Petition the court," she said quietly, "if you think it's necessary." Clara faltered. You don't understand what that means." "Oh, I do." Sylvia replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "Better than you imagine." Marcus frowned, confused. "Mom, I wish you a pleasant evening," Sylvia said, rising with dignified grace. "Lock the door on your way out." Outside, the wind howled through the pines. Inside, Sylvia closed the cedar desk drawer on a fresh stack of signed trust documents, her late husband's will resting safely beside them. To Marcus and Clara, she might have looked like a lonely grandmother teetering on the edge of senility. But beneath the quiet exterior, she was already 3 moves ahead, a master strategist preparing her endgame. A cold March rain rattled the windows as Sylvia Grant laid a linen cloth across the dining table. She worked with slow precision, smoothing each crease until the fabric gleamed like winter moonlight. In the kitchen, a roast finished browning, its aroma of garlic and rosemary winding through the house. It was the first family dinner she had hosted in months. She wanted everything just right, every plate aligned. Every candle trimmed, though not for the reasons her son and his wife might imagine. The doorbell chimed at exactly 7. Marcus entered first, umbrella dripping. Clara followed in a fitted navy coat, her eyes scanning the room as if to check for hidden flaws. "Smells amazing, Mom," Marcus said, shaking rain from his sleeves. "Thank you," Sylvia replied. "Sit, both of you, supper's ready." They settled across from her, steam rising from the dishes. The flickering candlelight made the silverware sparkle and cast long, wavering shadows on the walls. For a few minutes the conversation stayed safely mundane: traffic on the highway, a new client at Marcus's firm. Then Sylvia folded her hands and looked directly at them. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice steady but edged with something they couldn't quite name. Clara's fork paused midair. "Oh," Sylvia's gaze never left hers. "The apartment where you two live, the one on Linden Avenue. You've been paying rent through a management company, correct?" Marcus nodded cautiously. "Of course. Why?" "Because," Sylvia continued, her tone smooth as polished stone, "I am the owner of that entire building. I have decided to end the management contract and handle all matters personally." The room went perfectly silent. Clara blinked hard. "I beg your pardon." "You heard me," Sylvia said. "Starting today, I will manage the property directly, and you will receive a formal 30-day notice to vacate. It's all strictly legal and entirely fair." Marcus's mouth fell open. "Mom, you can't be serious." "I assure you I am," she replied, pouring herself a measured glass of water. "The paperwork was filed this morning." Clara found her voice first, brittle and sharp. "This is some kind of joke. You don't have the resources to buy a building in the city." Sylvia allowed a faint smile. "You've underestimated me before. It seems you're still doing so." Marcus pushed back his chair, the legs scraping the hardwood. "Why would you do this to us? Do this to you?" Sylvia tilted her head. "You threatened to have me declared incompetent. You tried to take my home. This isn't vengeance, Marcus, it's consequence." For a moment, only the hiss of rain on the windows filled the room. Clara's composure cracked. "You can't just throw us out in a month. We have rights." "You have exactly the rights stated in your lease," Sylvia said. "And those rights allow me to end your tenancy with 30 days notice. Nothing more, nothing less." Marcus ran a hand through his damp hair, eyes wide with a dawning realization. "All this time you knew you planned this." "I protected myself," Sylvia corrected softly. "The way your father would have wanted." Clara's voice rose, sharp enough to cut. "This is manipulation. You're using money to control us." Sylvia stayed seated, unshaken. "No, I'm using the law to defend my dignity. There's a difference." Marcus sank back into his chair, shoulders slumping. He looked at his mother with something like regret flickering across his face. "Mom," he whispered, "I never wanted it to go this far." Sylvia's expression softened just for him. "Then stop letting it." Clara, however, clenched her fists. "You think you've won some game," she said, her voice low with anger. "But you've only made things worse for yourself. We'll fight this." Sylvia met her glare, the candlelight catching the quiet steel in her eyes. "You're welcome to try," she said. "But remember, Clara, storms pass, deeds remain." The rain hammered harder against the glass as the words settled over the table like a final verdict. Marcus lowered his gaze to the linen cloth, the first glimmer of doubt clouding his features. Clara stared at Sylvia as if seeing her for the first time, the confident mask slipping inch by inch. Sylvia reached for her teacup and took a slow sip, the picture of calm. Outside, thunder rolled across Cedar Hill, but inside the only sound was the quiet shift of power, unmistakable and complete. The courthouse smelled faintly of rain-soaked wool and fresh paper as Sylvia Grant stepped through the heavy double doors. Morning light streamed across the marble floor, catching in the silver of her hair. She walked with quiet dignity, her lawyer Victoria Hale at her side. "Ready?" Victoria asked, adjusting her briefcase. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sylvia replied. Her voice carried no tremor. Today was not about fear, it was about truth. Across the lobby, Clara stood with her own attorney, a sharp-featured man in a charcoal suit. Her posture was rigid, chin lifted like a queen about to claim a throne. Marcus hovered beside her, pale and restless, eyes darting anywhere but his mother's face. Sylvia met his gaze for a heartbeat, offering a small nod. He swallowed hard, the hint of shame flickering in his eyes. Inside the courtroom, oak benches gleamed under the high ceiling. The air buzzed with whispers as neighbors, curious strangers, and a handful of reporters settled in. Clara's petition, an audacious request for full custody of the child she carried, and a restraining order accusing Sylvia of emotional abuse and harassment, had turned this hearing into a local spectacle. The bailiff called the room to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Alan Mercer. Sylvia's breath caught. Judge Mercer. She hadn't heard that name in decades. The judge strode to the bench. A tall man with silver hair and the composed air of someone accustomed to authority. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the room, then paused. His eyes narrowed as they landed on Sylvia. A beat of silence stretched. "Mrs. Grant?" he asked, voice carrying across the chamber. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. He leaned forward slightly, a slow recognition dawning. "Sylvia Grant, you worked at this courthouse years ago, didn't you?" "Clerk's office. I was an intern back then." A ripple of murmurs ran through the gallery. Clara shifted uneasily. Sylvia inclined her head. "That was a long time ago, Judge, and yet I remember," he said with a faint smile. "You helped me find my way when no one else had the time." He cleared his throat and straightened, the moment of nostalgia giving way to authority. "Let's proceed." Clara's attorney began aggressively, painting Sylvia as controlling, intrusive, and mentally unstable. He produced a few emails, Clara's own words, twisted to sound like harassment. Sylvia sat composed, hands folded in her lap. Victoria rose when it was her turn, sliding a thick binder across the table. "Your Honor," Victoria began, "we present detailed records, dates, times, and transcripts of every interaction Ms. Clara Grant initiated. We have phone logs, security camera footage from the Linden Avenue building, and notarized statements from tenants and neighbors." She opened the binder. Inside were carefully labeled tabs, meticulous notes Sylvia had kept for months. Every visit, every threat, every false accusation documented in neat handwriting. Clara's attorney objected, but Judge Mercer waved him off. "Overruled, proceed." Victoria's voice sharpened. "We also submit text messages in which Ms. Grant admits her intent to remove Mrs. Grant from her home for financial gain." Gasps rustled through the room. Clara's face blanched. Marcus closed his eyes. The judge examined the documents for a long moment. His brow furrowed. "Ms. Clara Grant," he said finally, "these records directly contradict your claims. Do you have evidence to the contrary?" Clara's attorney stammered, flipping through papers that suddenly looked flimsy. "No, Your Honor," Clara muttered, her voice barely audible. The verdict came swift and clear. "This court finds no evidence of abuse by Mrs. Sylvia Grant," Judge Mercer declared. "The petition for custody and the request for a restraining order are denied. Furthermore, given the documented attempts to defraud and intimidate, custody of the unborn child will remain shared with the father, Mr. Marcus Grant. Mrs. Grant retains full rights to her property and assets." The gavel struck like thunder. Clara's shoulders stiffened, her knuckles white against the table. Marcus let out a breath he seemed to have held for hours. Judge Mercer looked toward Sylvia, a trace of warmth in his eyes. "Justice is about truth, and today the truth is clear. Mrs. Grant, you have conducted yourself with grace and integrity." "Thank you, Your Honor," Sylvia said quietly. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled of wet pavement and new beginnings. Marcus caught up to his mother beneath the stone archway. "Mom," he said, voice raw, I'm so sorry." She turned to him, her expression gentle but steady. "Sorry for the hearing, or for everything before it?" "For all of it," he admitted. "For letting Clara push me, for doubting you. I didn't see what she was doing until it was too late." Sylvia placed a hand on his arm. "You see now, that's what matters. Marcus's eyes shone with remorse and something softer, respect. I don't deserve your forgiveness. You'll earn it, she said, one step at a time, as they walked into the fading afternoon. Sylvia felt the weight of months lift from her shoulders. The courthouse behind her was the same building where she had once filed records and fetched coffee for young interns, one of whom had just defended her dignity before the world. She glanced at her son, taller than she remembered, and for the first time in years she sensed the boy she had raised, the man she had hoped he would become. The storm had broken, and in its wake stood truth, love, and a quiet strength no court could ever take away. 5 years later, Cedar Hill wore spring like a crown. Roses clambered over the white picket fence in every hue: deep crimson, buttery yellow, soft blush. Their fragrance drifted on the mild evening air, mingling with the sound of children's laughter from the lane below. Sylvia Grant knelt in her garden, her hands deep in the soil she had tended for decades. The earth felt warm and alive beneath her palms, each bloom a living memory of Richard and the long, winding path she had walked since his passing. "Grandma," a small voice called. She looked up to see Lily racing across the yard, her dark curls bouncing, her little sneakers kicking up petals. Marcus followed more slowly, carrying a picnic basket and a tired but genuine smile. "Easy there, Lily," he said, laughing as his daughter darted toward Sylvia. "Grandma's roses are delicate. They're strong," Sylvia said, rising and brushing dirt from her hands. "Just like this one." She opened her arms and Lily ran straight into them. Marcus set down the basket and hugged his mother. "You've added more roses," he noted, glancing around the overflowing garden. "Every year," Sylvia replied, "each one for a woman who found her way back." After supper, they settled on the porch with tea. The twilight painted the hills in streaks of lavender and gold. Fireflies winked in the gathering dusk. Marcus cradled his cup, watching the steam curl upward. "I can't believe how much has changed," he said quietly. "I barely recognized the man I was back then." Sylvia studied her son's face, now marked by lines of responsibility and finally peace. "You've done well," she said. He shook his head. "You did it. You built something out of all that pain." The Rose Haven Foundation had become more than Sylvia ever imagined. What began as a small community project now offered housing, counseling, and job training for women left behind by their families. In 5 years, more than 50 women had found new lives there. Many sent letters of gratitude, some returned to help others, carrying forward the quiet strength Sylvia had shown them. "I only gave them a door," Elian Sylviaor said. "They chose to walk through it." Marcus glanced at Lily chasing fireflies in the yard. "She'll grow up knowing what courage looks like." Sylvia reached across the small table, covering his hand with hers. "So will you." Later, when the moon rose pale and full, Marcus tucked Lily into the old oak bed that had once been his. "Grandma," the little girl whispered, "will you tell the story about the brave lady again?" Sylvia sat on the edge of the mattress, the soft lamplight catching the silver in her hair. "All right," she said, lowering her voice to a storyteller's hush. "Once there was a grandmother who lived on a hill of roses. A fierce dragon tried to scare her away, but she remembered the magic hidden in her heart. With kindness and patience, she showed the dragon that true power lives in love and truth." Lily's eyes grew wide. "Did the dragon go away?" "He learned to be gentle," Sylvia said, smiling. "And the grandmother's roses bloomed brighter than ever." Marcus leaned against the doorway, listening, his throat tight. The fable softened their family's painful history into something Lily could carry without fear, a story of courage, forgiveness, and quiet triumph. After Lily drifted to sleep, Marcus joined his mother on the porch once more. The night hummed with crickets, the garden glowed faintly under the moon. "I never thanked you," he said, "for standing firm, for believing I could change." Sylvia looked toward the horizon where the last streaks of daylight had faded. "We all lose our way," she said softly, "but we can always choose to come back." He slipped an arm around her shoulders, and for a long moment they sat without words, breathing in the scent of roses and damp earth. As the clock neared midnight, Sylvia rose and walked among the blooms. She touched each flower gently as though greeting old friends. The petals were cool with dew, the colors deep and luminous in the moonlight. Here was the life she had reclaimed, not through vengeance but through patience and quiet resolve. She had protected her home, healed her family, and turned sorrow into a haven for others. Sylvia paused at the tallest rose bush, Richard's favorite, and smiled into the silvered night. The roses swayed in a soft breeze, their fragrance wrapping around her like a promise that love endures. The garden glowed, alive with laughter long past and hope still to come. Sylvia stood among the blooms, an emblem of steadfast grace, a woman who had weathered every storm and grown stronger in the sunlight of her own unshakable spirit. And that's the quiet miracle of life. Storms end, but love endures. Most important of all, I have kept my true self. Did Sylvia's journey move you? Do you like this story? And from which city are you listening? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments and feel where you are in the world. Your words and a simple thank you mean everything to me. They help Loving Truth Stories grow so I can bring you more unforgettable moments like this. And if you never want to miss the next chapter of courage and love, tap subscribe and join the Loving Truth Stories family today.